So turn to the lecture notes for chapter 13, and we'll talk about this story again. I know I just read it, but I am going to read it again. And it says this in John 5:1-18. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now that's present tense, right? That's interesting. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" So the man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Is that a yes?
I mean, it's like
a no?
It's like I try and get healed, but it don't work.
Yeah.
I kind of give it up.
It's kind of like, no offense, but it's kind of like when a student, doesn't do their homework and then there's this elaborate reason why and whatever else. They're not really like, "Where's your homework?" Well, you see, there was this problem last night, and our power went out, and our dog died, and whatever, all the things. And it's an excuse, right? It's an excuse. It's a yes or no question, but he gives an excuse. The answer, at least the answer of the student, pertains to the question. This answer doesn't even pertain to the question. Do you want to be healed? Yes or no? Or I don't know. But he says, "I can't get into the pool because I'm an invalid." And so that's an interesting response. And I think it shows us a little something of where his heart is. Gentlemen, I'll ask it one time. And if I ask it again, you won't be sitting with each other. Okay? You need to pay attention up here. So he's giving an answer that doesn't fit the question. Yes?
Do you think he could have just misunderstood? Like, he thought Jesus was asking, "Why are you just laying here? Why aren't you trying to get up?" So he's like, "Well, I do want to get healed, but I just can't get up, and everyone steps in before me."
Yeah, while that's possible, I think John would have written it differently. Not written it differently. I think he wrote it because he wanted it written. So I think he put in some sort of explanation of why that was. Because he does that elsewhere, because he kept the money bag and he was a thief. He said about this. Okay, so. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." Awesome.
Yeah, doesn't it go along? Doesn't Jesus say in the Bible that your sin isn't the reason why you're disabled? And then now he's saying
it isn't
don't
always the reason. It isn't always the reason. But sometimes it is. Isn't that true? Some diseases are caused because of our behavior, and some diseases we don't deserve at all.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Yeah. So.
Wasn't that, with the case that Ellie was talking about, wasn't that when God said it wasn't what his parents got a right to get, it was so that
Yeah, because the Pharisees were trying to trick him.
Yes,
and they were
that's true.
Why is this?
That's true.
So he's like, "No, he's just there so I can come and heal him and try to do that."
Right. But this may have been, we don't know. We don't know why he was an invalid. We know he wasn't an invalid from birth because it gives a number. It would have said the man was blind from birth. So we know that there was some point at which
38 years old.
So sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jews it was Jesus who healed him. So that's interesting too.
Why
is
would
it
he
not?
go back?
Maybe he didn't know that the Jews wanted to kill Jesus or wanted to arrest Jesus. Maybe he didn't know that, and so he didn't know that he was hurting Jesus. But maybe, and I don't think we know. But maybe he took offense at sin no more, so that nothing else happens to you. Who is Jesus, man? Arrest him. Yeah.
So the book that's
Yeah, we will talk about that. I think there had to have been some people who got some sort of restorative help, or else that idea wouldn't have happened. Whether it was actually healing, or whether at this time it had that people had believed that so long that they didn't know that it didn't heal. We don't know for sure. But I think it's possible that there was some sort of help for something, arthritis or something that it helped that. Yeah.
Also, could have been considered healing because the water would have been really dirty and that water would have been clean.
Yeah,
It was
well,
spring
it would have been
water,
because
wasn't
it was spring water. So it's
Just saying, other water, other pools might have been dirty.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, it's clean, so it must be
must
like
be
pure.
So that could be. I've never thought of that, but that's a possibility. Yes.
you'd think it wouldn't be clean at this point if there's 100 people running in and out of it every
The
single
water,
morning.
right? But it's
It's
just
moving
from
water.
springs.
Yeah, it is.
Like, have you ever been to the
But it's the
mountains?
base. It's
Okay.
the base of it. So the
Have
spring
you ever
runs
been to
down,
the
and this is the pool at the bottom. Meeting
Have you
all
ever
the
been to the
water flows
mountains
in.
where there's a lake because of the spring?
Yes.
Regardless of how many people go in there, the water's still extremely clean. It's a whole lot cleaner than a stagnant pool. Period.
So there she's so let's keep on going. So you can talk about it in very nice words. At lunch.
By the pool.
By the pool. And this is why Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father and making himself equal with God. So we've already learned that John omits some things, and of course this passage begins with "after this," and as I've told you before, that means there was some time between the healing of the nobleman. He's back in Jerusalem again, so he's no longer in Galilee, and we don't know how long that time is. I believe your book says this was Passover, the unnamed Passover. It just says a feast of the Jews. It doesn't tell us what time of year it is. It doesn't give any context clues to know what feast. It's just a feast. It's an unnamed feast. So I'm not going to call it Passover. Maybe it was Passover, but we don't know for sure that it was. So this is sometime after the healing of the nobleman. But remember John's purpose in telling us this story. It's the same as the purpose for any other story he tells. These were written, the story was written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. So John tells us this story that we may believe in Jesus and have life because of that. So Um, okay. Okay, so first of all, we don't know if this is the first year of his ministry. We don't know if it's a year. They know they think it's a year because it's Passover to Passover, but it may not be Passover. But here are some things that have happened up to this point. Let's put it that way. Don't know if it's the first year, don't know any of that, but here's some things that have happened. Jesus cleansed the temple. He met with Nicodemus, that's his name. Nicodemus. Christ met with a woman in the well at Samaria. He healed the nobleman's son. So that isn't all he did. Even John tells us at the end of his gospel that Jesus did a whole lot of other things that aren't recorded in this book. And so the synoptic gospels kind of fill in those things. Sometimes we can tell how long a gap is, but sometimes it's fuzzier, and this is one of the fuzzier ones. So I talked about that. The records of Matthew, Mark, and Luke then tell us those other things that Jesus did. But we're not going to go into that now because we have to go fish. So he went to from Cana to Nazareth, and then he goes up to Capernaum, and then he goes down to Jerusalem, and he reveals this story takes place in Jerusalem. So he reveals his deity by healing at the feast. So John gives us this account of the healing at the Pool of Bethesda on Jesus' next trip to Jerusalem. And so let's talk about the place of the incident. It was near the sheep gate. And John writes, there is a gate, or there is a pool in Jerusalem. And so this pool must have still been in existence when John wrote his gospel. So there were 12 gates in all that led into Jerusalem, and some of the gates are known. Some of them we know were gates, but we don't know which gate it was. And the sheep gate is one of those gates, and it was the gate. It was called that because it was the gate that the sheep were led through to be slaughtered for the Passover. And your curriculum says that this is also the gate that Jesus, when the crucifixion took place outside of Jerusalem, and that he walked through that gate. I've never heard another source say that, but it's very possible that that's the gate he left from. But then also, the curriculum gets Calvary wrong. You've probably seen Gordon's Calvary, and Gordon, I think, was like an archaeologist in the 1930s or something. And the side of it looks something like a skull, and so everybody's like, "This is it. This is the place." It wasn't. It wasn't a place because of the other things we know about it. They were not true. But this curriculum thinks that Gordon's Calvary is Calvary, and it's not. So if that's what they're going on, then he wouldn't have probably wouldn't have left. But I don't know which gate, so I'm not further on. So there was a pool there that was a structure that was built to be protected from the elements. That's the colonnades it talks about. That's like a place where you can get out of the rain or the sun and not be out in the open. And for whatever reason, this pool got the reputation of being the water having healing properties. So there would be a lot of people with maladies, whether that was like this man being paralyzed, whether it was because they were blind or deaf or whatever it was. they would gather there, and the story was that because the water intermittently stirred, because the spring intermittently spouted out. But they believed that was an angel. The belief was that an angel stirred the water, and the first person into the pool would be healed. I can't imagine the pandemonium when it stirred and tried to get there to be first, but whatever. And so there's the sheep gate.
That seems like possibly how
But
words
there's the pool of Bethesda. So yeah, that had to be the sheep gate because that we do know where the pool of Bethesda is. That's why, and you'll see that. So near the sheep gate, it was called Bethesda. Bethesda, and you want to know this. Bethesda means house of mercy. Bethesda means house of mercy. The Naval Hospital in Washington, D.C. is called Bethesda after this. The house of mercy. I don't have time for this story now, but my sister was healed twice at that hospital when she was born. She was supposed to die. The doctor said she would die. She's living in Switzerland now, so I'm pretty sure she would die. And she had a 10-minute grand mal seizure, and she had meningitis as a 3-year-old, spinal meningitis, and they thought she would die. And the doctors kept saying, "Will too." Sorry. So Bethesda, it means house of mercy. And today we can still see remains of that pool. This is what the pool of Bethesda looks like today in the old city of Jerusalem. And it was discovered in 1888 when the Church of St. Anne, also ancient but not that ancient, was being repaired. And they found this reservoir of water. It was a new discovery at the time. And they knew it was the pool of Bethesda because on the walls were these etchings and these carvings of an angel troubling the water, an angel stirring up the water. And it was near the sheep gate. So that's how they knew it was the pool of Bethesda. The pool was cut from solid rock. It was about 55 feet long and 12 feet wide, so not huge, but it would be a nice swimming pool for your backyard. That would be a nice big swimming pool. And it was approachable by a flight of stairs. You'd have to go down these steep stairs to get into the water. And the pool was filled with water that came from a nearby spring. Called the Gihon Spring. So this was an excavation. You can see that that's a colonnade, right? And it's covered. That was found in 1888. And the spring gushed unpredictably in intervals, and that's what caused the troubling or the disturbing of the water. But the tradition grew up that it was because they didn't know about this. So the tradition grew up that the water that was an angel that was making the water. And so it became a gathering place. That's the spring. It became a gathering place for the lame and the blind and the lame, and that kind of gives us an idea of their spiritual. What is, I'll finish this. So afterward, churches were built over the spot. Anywhere that something important happened, people built up churches, and then that church would be some enemy would come in and level the church, and they'd rebuild it, and so a church was built over it. That's why it took a while to find it. And today, tourists can go to those remains, and many memorials are there, and I think there's a church there as well. So what is the meaning of the incident? It reveals the grace and mercy of God. When the lame man told Christ his plight, Jesus didn't rebuke him. But do you want to be healed? He didn't get upset at him for his spiritual ignorance. He didn't say, "There's no angel that heals birds." Trust me, I know the angels. Nobody's doing that. Instead he revealed his own power and deity to this man. It wasn't an angel the man just needed Jesus. That's true for all of us. And so this story was recorded by John to reveal the deity of Christ, to reveal who he is, and to tell us about how he brings salvation. These were written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you have life in his name. So the story is a true, actual account, and it's recorded in John to do this very thing. To see that who Jesus is, that he is. So how do we see the deity of Christ revealed in this story? Yeah. So God's my Father and I do the work my Father does. What else? Yeah.
By saying he's over the angels. Like you don't need the angels.
Healed the guy. Right? He healed the guy. That's something only God can do. So all of that is true. All of that points to what that Jesus is God. So Christ's power healed the man, something only God can do. But there's no mention of the man's faith, neither before nor after the healing. And as I said, he doesn't ask, or he doesn't say that he wants to be healed. But he did do as Jesus said. Jesus said, "Take up your mat and walk." He could have said, "But I'm an invalid. I'm paralyzed. I can't get up." Even after he was healed, but he didn't. He didn't even know this guy, Jesus, but he did what Jesus asked him to do. I mean, think about somebody who's in a wheelchair. I have a dear friend who's a paraplegic because of a car accident. And what if a complete stranger walks up and says, "I want to walk"? You might feel like returning. You might feel like they're looking down. And so that might have had something to do. I don't think Jesus but I think it had something to do with his attitude as well. But when Jesus says gets up, he does. Gets up and walks. He does what Jesus asks him to do. And that's a good lesson for all of us to do what Jesus asked him to do. Jesus supplied everything he needed, even the strength to stand. So we also see Christ's deity in his authority over the Sabbath. He is the one who created the Sabbath. He gave the law, we're told, in Peter's writings, maybe in Paul's writings. And so he is Lord of the Sabbath, and only God is Lord of the Sabbath. And so he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. God doesn't stop working on Saturday for the Jews. Sunday for Christians. He doesn't say, "Yep, I'm going to take a break." And he says, "My Father's working, so I'm working." And so the miracle happened on the Sabbath, which the book says had become something of a national fetish in Israel. They were really, really strict about the Sabbath, and they wanted to make sure everyone else kept those rules. But most of them were frivolous and senseless, and the vast majority of them were nowhere in the Old Testament. Like, you could wear a sewn shoe on the Sabbath, but you couldn't wear a nailed shoe. You could walk a certain, it's called a Sabbath stay walk. You could walk a certain amount on the Sabbath, but no. And all of them were very picky, rules. Let's. Oh, we're close. Okay, one more question for you, and then we'll stop there. What was? Oh, nope.
The belt, yeah, the belt.